what are your thoughts on the, I'm going to put it in quotes because I don't want to necessarily say this is your concept, but this is the chiropractic concept of subluxation and manipulation. Subluxations of the spine and then manipulations to address those. What are your thoughts on that? And what does the evidence say about that?
So there is a true subluxation. It's an orthopedic subluxation. It has its own definition,
Yes.
and that is a thing, and that thing exists. The chiropractic definition of a subluxation is antiquated. It's old, and if you are living in the modern age, it's absolute horseshit.
Okay.
Does that work?
Well, no, I don't. I'm not looking at you to say this. I'm not. I'm just. I agree.
Well, that's based on an idea.
There's a different. Our definition of subluxation is different. So move that out of the equation. But I'm driving more at the second part of which you responded to, which is just like, in your head, what do you think about that concept? And you replied to that, and just what does the evidence show?
Well,
I'm not looking for you specifically to say that to me, but I just want to know what you think.
It was never taught in my program, and I went to school in 2004 is when I graduated. So there was no mention of subluxation back then. There are some schools that still teach it. There are, and those are rare. I think there are 2 schools, maybe 3 if you count the New Zealand school.
Yes.
So that concept is not really taught in chiropractic education, but some people, when they are thrown out, like we talked about, into private practice, and really that first 3 or 4 years should be a residency.
Yes.
But now they're thrown into the real world and they have to make money and pay student loans. They start looking around for people to say, well, what do I need to do to make, like, how does this work? How do I make money? And there are sharks out there, and they say, well, there's this concept called subluxation. You teach them that. It's very simple for the lay person to understand, and then they'll give you lots of money.
Yeah.
Because it's what's the word for it? It's an archaic sort of thought process. Oh, that the spine can bend in a certain way and pinch a nerve, and that nerve goes to a place, and then if that nerve is pinched, that place won't work well anymore. It'll hurt, so we're going to unpinch it. And like that would be the most that's the most nonsensical. We've been through a couple million years of evolution. That is like the most nonsensical evolutionary process for a nervous system to develop in a mammal that I could ever think of. That when it moved, it would pinch body parts.
Yes.
Or could have body parts without actual overt, like, orthopedic injury to the body part, but it was an old archaic thought, and some cultures still believe that stuff. So some cultures, Latin American cultures, Southern American cultures, still believe in these sort of regions that could be affected. We would think of them as dermatomes or myotomes, but they think of them as just, some of them, it's metaphysical. I did something bad. That's why that area hurts, because I was misbehaving. And so this is, we're coming at this from presentism because we know now, but the physicians, that was state-of-the-art thinking in the late 1800s, was this idea of subluxation. So the Christian scientists were the first ones to discuss this. Subluxation, is, from a chiropractic standpoint, is a garbage can diagnosis. It was tossed into the dustbin of history by many early physicians, including Christian scientists who were the early manipulators.
Yes.
The agrarian farmers from Eastern Europe that came to America, when the farmer would come home, his wife would adjust him on the porch because he had so much back pain from working all day, from overloading his system. And she would come home and wrap a towel around his mid spine, his thoracic spine, and start doing these thrusts on them. And they believed in this out of place system. Those ideas fade over time as long as we are responsible enough to take them out of the lexicon. Some chiropractors haven't taken them out yet, so some people will still be there to believe it. But those people are disappearing by the day, thank goodness. Like, we're smarter than that now.
Well, two points. So number one, when I look at a lot of the conversation that goes on in the comments, in the videos that I put out, people talk a lot about the subluxations, and granted, most of them are lay people, some of them are chiropractors, and I think so. Regardless of the fact that it's not taught, somehow it seems, this whole idea seems to persist, right? So
Right.
I'm not sure what we have to do to change that, but it still seems to persist. But the other thing that I will say is this: um, I have made it. I have made it a major goal of mine to never have a patient leave my office without answering all their questions and without having them have a level of understanding of what is going on. And
Right.
but I could be talking about things at a very high orthopedic level and totally blow them out of the water. I have to recognize that, not everybody has the same level of comprehension. And so
Right.
I am not against the idea of, and I don't want to speak disparagingly of people, but I'll just use the term dumbing things down. Sometimes I will bring something down, and in my mind, I'm going, man, I know that this is not the exact way it is, but for this person to understand what I'm talking about, I got to simplify it like this. So I am not against people
It's that
doing
triangle.
Yes,
Patient, the evidence-based triangle. That's the patient expectation side of things.
Exactly. So I'm not against
Bringing it to their
people,
level.
sort of massaging things a little bit to get somebody to understand it. I'm not against that. But as I said with the first point, this whole idea that this persists despite what we know now, right? It's just like, it astounds me how persistent a concept this is,
It's one thing to bring it down to a patient's level so they can sort of like, okay, I kind of get what's going on here. That's one thing. This is a different thing. And this is why it's a pervasive problem. It's not that. It's a sales tool. It's a sales tool by some chiropractors. Because what are we talking about when we're talking about rehab, active care, and evidence-based care? We are talking about a system where we empower the patient to take care of themselves. Or to, as chiropractors or any physician these days, we do all believe in holistic care. We do believe that the body has the ability to heal itself under the right conditions. But we want the patient to be empowered to do that themselves, unless they can't, and then they need a professional like an orthopedic surgeon or a chiropractor or a physiotherapist, whatever. These folks with the subluxation-based sales concept, they are teaching patients that the only person that can relieve the patient of their problem is the trained chiropractor, who's the only person who could find this misalignment of the joint and is the only person that can release the misalignment from the joint. And they're the only person that can ever tell you have a misalignment for the joint. So you need to depend on the provider to get the health care you need. Now that is, all the other things are cute, and communicating on a fair level with patients to something they can understand is very respectable. This other thing that they're doing is, it's straight up bullshit, and it needs to stop. But it's also what buys them their boat. It's also what gives them their ego and their credibility in their community. These chiropractors, their name is on the shingle, and they're on TikTok too, and they're on YouTube too, and they want followers. They want to participate in the like economy. And they get a lot of almost pseudo-religious, pseudo-preacher play, clout, when they do this for themselves and amongst their own buddies that also preach the same. They get to go to their annual meeting and get to the bar and be like, well, how many people did you sell large packages of treatment to this year? Like, I sold 800, 56 visit packages. How many did you sell? And that's the stuff we're not for. That's the stuff we're against. But it's really hard to get them out of it once they're in it. And that's where I'm totally with the skeptic. Like, that stuff needs to stop. I'm totally with you. That needs to stop. And I've got 10,000 chiropractors or more that also agree. I'm sure it's like a majority of the chiropractors agree that stuff needs to stop. We're on the same page. How the hell do we stop it?
No,
I don't know.
I don't know either.
That's
And
above my pay grade.
yeah, and you know, like I had a comment from a chiropractor on a video recently, and then you know, when I started to engage this person, they had made some kind of comment, um, you know, a general comment about medicine, and then it kind of went on into this thing about COVID and the vaccine, and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Okay, so now you're jumping from MS, like, and not to say that I am a COVID expert, because I'm not. I'm an orthopedic surgeon, but I do have a undergraduate in genetics, and I have a master's degree in molecular genetics. So, and I was like, wait a minute. So you're gonna start talking to me about this vaccine as a chiropractor, and you're telling people not to go, like, based on what? Like, where, you know what I mean? And so,
Right.
and I think, okay, yes, this whole idea of subluxations has to stop, but sometimes it goes even beyond that, right? And it's like, how are you even qualified to even talk about this other thing over here, right?
Not qualified, not qualified. So that's one of the drawbacks. If you want to give the skeptics their credibility, one of the drawbacks of allowing someone to call themselves a doctor is they might take it a little too far. Chiropractors have like maybe 1 or 2 survey courses in immunology during their education. I was in the Air Force, so chiropractic sort of my I wasn't traditionally educated, like I didn't go grad school, chiropractic school. I was in the Air Force at the military first, but I worked in the flight medicine clinic and the immunization clinic. So I had more immunization background than your standard chiropractor, and I have no comfort talking like that's way out of the lane, right? But it's not out of the root philosophical lane that some chiropractors get in this, because, and this is the irony, chiropractors get into chiropractic because they want to get into natural healing, you know, that the body can heal itself naturally. And the great irony there is your main tool to talk about natural healing is that you from the outside are pushing on someone's insides. Like if it's natural healing, you don't need to push on them at all, you know?
Yeah.
There's no chiropractors have no business talking immunization. They have no business whatsoever. There is some public health responsibilities that go along with being a healthcare provider. And once again, there are probably 2, maybe 3 schools where a chiropractic student will be misguided into thinking they have any ability whatsoever or training whatsoever to comment on these things. Unfortunately, one of those schools is the largest producers of chiropractors in the world. So, and there was just a recent article that I was quoted in the Atlanta Constitution, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, whatever their paper is in Atlanta. No offense, but I was quoted in there. They have an article about that, chiropractors making comments about immunizations. There's no place for it. But it goes back to this original idea that when that original early 1900s battle was going on, who's going to run this house? Is it going to be medical doctors or chiropractors? Because at one point, after the Flexner report was written, medical schools started closing down. So the enrollment rate for medical doctors was going down, while the enrollment rate for chiropractic schools was going up. And the American Medical Association said, oh my gosh, we have a problem here. If they keep enrolling the way they do, there'll be way more chiropractors than there are physicians. And a turf war began. Now, that turf war was eventually won by the American Medical Association and medical doctors, but it wasn't until the 1970s that the turf war was identified, and it was identified in the Supreme Court. And the American Medical Association was found guilty of antitrust violations. They were actually willfully trying to destroy the chiropractic profession. It was a trade battle that was going on, while at the same time there's this legitimate science battle going on too. So, you know, to the victor go the spoils. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying there's more history to this than just chiropractors are weirdos and medical doctors are not.
Well, there are some medical doctors that are weirdos too. So, you know.
Yeah. I think in every bunch, right? In every attorney, like every profession, you got a batch of weirdos. I'm just saying, I'm not going to deny that there's like a higher percentage in the chiropractic profession. We need to trim that back. Like,
Hmm.
what's the average allowable amount of weirdos per profession? Is it 20%?
Right,
Let's
right.
dial us back to 20%, and we'll be good.
Well, but the responsibility for that lays with that. That can't be anybody but chiropractors, right? Like, as a profession, chiropractors have to be the ones that say, "Oh, yo,
Right.
brother, you shouldn't be talking about immunizations." You know what I mean, or whatever. Like, you have to police your own, because
And you guys do that, right?
of
You
course,
guys do that, right?
of,
Medical doctors keep each other in line.
of course we do, right?
I think that's a huge distinction. It's a huge distinction. Like if you had a fellow orthopedic doctor who was way out of line, like he was rubbing maple syrup on people's low backs to fix disc injuries, like you would say something, right?
Of course we would. And
We,
I can think of orthopedic surgeons in my own community who have had their, who have been called out by other orthopedic surgeons who have said, yo, what this guy is doing is not appropriate care. We do not support that. And they've had their orthopedic responsibilities restricted, right? Because
sure.
the college has listened to what other orthopedic surgeons have said, and said, yeah, your peers have looked at what you're doing. They've said that this is not appropriate care. And as such, either you change what you're doing or we restrict your practice, right? And so I can think of people in this city, two at least, that have had their practices restricted.
Yeah, we don't have that. So that's a distinction. We don't. In fact, we have the opposite. I'm notorious for speaking out against the sort of unethical behaviors in our profession. And I've had threats of violence, death threats. There's plenty of smears online, plenty of smears in social media. We have the whatever that word is. My vocabulary is fading through the interview. I've been ostracized in the community. Like you're out because you say stuff we don't like. You're going against our biases, and that's where you get that sort of cult mentality of the chiropractic extremist. Is like, if you don't say what we like, then there's not going to be any change. We're just going to start to delist you or deplatform you.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a huge distinction. I think the residency distinction, because that's where you get that power to speak out.
Yes.
The board certification sequence there, because through that board you can regulate yourselves.
For sure.
We don't have one of those. And then 3, this ability to speak out against what is inappropriate within your profession. We don't have that. They say, shut up and look the other way, which is obscene because there's so few of us. Like we practically could know everybody by name. For all the chiropractors in the country or in the world, I think I have 5% in a Facebook group. And we all know each other. Like it's very easy to point each other out and be like, you are not behaving.
Yes, yes. Well, yeah.
So, and you've interviewed plenty. You've interviewed plenty that would love to have this ability to police ourselves, but our hands are tied. It becomes very frustrating.